Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's 7 for 7 replay on YouTube Live. I'm Kevin Spry. I work in the professional learning group at Texas Instruments, part of Education Technology. I manage the group there, and we work with instructors and educators like David Sword tonight. The 7 for 7 session is something that we host at our annual T Cubed International Conference each year. And this is a session where 7 educators get to speak for 7 minutes each, hence the 7 for 7, about a topic they're passionate about. And one of those speakers this evening is we're going to hear from is David Sword. David is a T Cube national instructor. He's been part of the T Cubed organization for over 20 years. He's currently a consultant with the Wayne County Regional Education Service Agency in Michigan. He's also an adjunct professor at Wayne State University, and he's been in several bands through the years, playing guitar, bass guitar, and keyboards. A man after my own heart. He's also played in church worship bands for more than 30 years. And this evening, we're really excited to have him here with us and to rewatch David's presentation on music is math with feelings. And then we're going to have a chance to chat with David, have a little bit of rap session in terms of being able to answer questions. Good evening, David. Good to see you.
Good evening, Kevin. Thanks for having me here.
All right. And we're going to now replay and see your session.
As a music person, I got to have a mic in my hand, right? So I took some paper and some masking tape and got rid of some of the trash and made myself a microphone. So I'm good to go, right? So I want to talk today about music is math with feelings. And I want to begin with a reference to the song More Than a Feeling by the band Boston. You familiar with that song? Well, the chorus says, more than a feeling, when I hear that old song they used to play. Well, in my imagination, I like to think that the lyrics are a little different than that. I like to think of it as more than a feeling, it's math with feelings. Because it's really true that music and math are deeply intertwined. For example, the chord pattern leading into the chorus of this song is very famous and very catchy, and it was coming through the sound system earlier today, but we're going to try and see what happens. Let's take a listen. It's gone. But those of you that know the song, you probably recognize the chord pattern, right? So most of us, when we hear it, what we hear is dum da dum 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 da dum da dum, right? 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 A little air guitar thrown in on the side, right? Okay. Well, see, that's not what I hear though. What I hear is 1 1 slide up to 4 6 my minor 4 5 4 5. Whatever it is written right there, right? That's what I hear, though. What am I referring to? When I listen to music, I listen to the numbers of the chords, called the chord numbering system, where every chord in a scale has a number based on where that root note falls within the scale. For example, here you have the C major scale, okay? 8 total notes, but really only 7 different notes because the C repeats. If I were to build a 3-note chord onto each of those notes, I get 7 chords. 3 of them are major, 3 of them are minor, and 1 is diminished. And this pattern holds for any key, as we see here. Here we see a variety of keys, but all of those keys, the 1 chord is a major, the 2 is a minor, the 3 is a minor, and so on. So in the first line, we see the C major scale chords that we saw in the previous slide. But if you want to play along with Boston in a real guitar and not an air guitar, you're going to go down to line 5, and you're going to play G, G, slide up to C, E minor, D, D, C, G, because you're playing along with Boston in their key. But the beautiful thing about the chord numbering system is it doesn't matter what key you want to play in. If you know the numbers of the chords, you can play any song in any key. That's the beautiful part of the chord numbering system, our first connection to math and music. But the math and musical connections do not end there. In fact, the history for the scale itself can be traced back to Pythagoras, because it was the Pythagoreans that taught us that musical pitches are defined by mathematical ratios. Did you know that? If you take a string and stretch it out and pluck it, you'll get a tone. But if you cut that string in half and pluck it, you will get the exact same tone an octave higher. So a 2-to-1 ratio, or a string length of 1/2, produces an octave. And here we see 13 different Pythagorean ratios that make up the 13 notes of the chromatic scale, which is really the major scale, the 8 blue lines that you see there, that we saw in the key of C a moment ago. But the white lines are the 5 passing tones in between those. And furthermore, it is these exact same Pythagorean ratios that define where the frets go on a guitar. So I imagine it as Pythagoras was the very first rock and roll guitar here. Yeah. This fact is such a famous part of our math and musical history that it's even been celebrated by the Donald. Yep, Donald Duck and Math Magic Land. Celebrated with the Pythagoreans, right? So Pythagoras is definitely my choice for lead guitar. So who's on keyboards? Well, for that, we're going to look to Fibonacci and his famous sequence, right? 2, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, starting with 2 1s, right? Okay? Well, to see the Fibonacci sequence, let's look at his typical keyboard, all right? But to see it more clearly, let's look at 1 octave of the C scale, like we've already looked at, right? But here we have 1 octave of the C scale. I don't know what you see when you look at that, but I'm going to tell you what I see. I see 2 black keys, and I see 3 black keys, making up the 5 accidentals within the 8 notes major scale, and when we put them all together, we get the 13 tones in the chromatic scale, or 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Not only is Fibonacci on keyboards, Fibonacci is in the keyboard. So I've got Pythagoras on guitar, I've got Fibonacci on the keyboards. To round out our great band, as with any great band, we need a great drummer, and for that we look to Euclid. Okay? In 2005, Godfrey Toussaint from McGill University in Montreal wrote about the connections between the Euclidean algorithm and musical rhythms, among other things, including some things in nuclear physics and chaos theory. Crazy article, but I'm interested right now in the musical connections. In short, Godfrey was talking about a way to use Euclidean spacing to space a certain number of objects equally within a certain number of spaces. And one example of that is the Euclidean 3/8 beat. We can spread 3 beats as evenly as possible over 8 spaces. Visually, it looks like the 1, and then the and after the 2, and then the 4. But musically, this is the dotted quarter note, 8th quarter note tie, quarter note pattern, which Toussaint identified as the Cuban tresillo, or American rockabilly, made famous by Elvis in Hound Dog. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, right? Rocking all the time, right? So that is an example of a Euclidean beat, and so Euclid is definitely my drummer. So I began this talk today with my imagination regarding the lyrics of a song. Now it's your turn to imagine. Because I'd like you to imagine Euclid on drums, I'd like you to imagine Fibonacci on keyboards, Pythagoras on lead guitar, and yours truly out front. I like to call us the Euclidean Fibonacci Pythagorean Sword Play Band, or EFDSPB, which kind of sounds like F, Pazipaba, F, Pazipaba, F, Pazipaba, F, whoop, well, you get out a pen and make a segment of a line now. Don't be afraid, you're about to use your mind. That's okay. If it ain't too clear, we're going to work together, and we'll start right here. Now, scribe know a little segment of a line, but it goes right here and make it just like mine. Connect these two and just hang loose, and then call this the. You never heard that in a rap song, have you? No, that's what I'm talking about. Now take the side length here and you call it A, and you multiply A times A. Take the side length here and you call it, and you multiply. Yeah. Take these two and you add them up, and I'm on a roll so I won't shut up. There's another side we still can see, the hypotenuse, and we call it C. Now take a look at what we got. We got a right triangle, and it's really hot. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Do you see that C? Don't be confused. It's just the length of that. That's twice. I rhymed it. Now here's the truth, and it really works. I'm telling the truth because I ain't no jerk. C times C equals this. It was proven by. Because it's F posippable, F posippable, F posippable. More than a feeling, it's math with feelings.
All right. How is that seeing that again, Dave?
I cracked myself up, man.
Oh, like you say, you have to tell people,
man.
laugh later when you have more time, right? That was great. That was good. Yeah. Mic drop ending. That was wonderful to see that again. Enjoyed it the first time seeing it live. It's great to be able to chat with you about that. That's one of the things at the session that we don't ever really get a chance to sort of address this. And so people have an opportunity, if you want to submit some questions to David live, you can do so. We'll sort of follow along there and try and answer them as they come up. I just wanted to start with one question because I wanted to sort of, we touched a little bit about it in terms of your background and your, growing up and so on. How did you, though, yourself first see that connection as a student? When you're looking at the idea of music and math.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think as I mentioned in the original talk there, when I hear music, I hear I hear numbers. So like when a lot of times I pick up the bass notes really easy, and so I hear boom, that's a 1, and then I can hear when it jumps up to a 4 or jumps up to a 6. So like I think I started realizing the big connections between math and music when I started seeing those particular connections with the numbers of the chords. Of course, rhythms are so much. There's fractions and so many different numbers mixed in with the rhythms. But then even as I became a teacher, started seeing some of the deeper connections, like the Pythagorean ratios wasn't something that I knew when I was younger, but that was something that was really cool that connected to math. And so I think for me, though, the biggest thing about the math and the music was the numbering of the chords. And even to this day, when I hear songs, it doesn't matter what song I'm listening to. As soon as I start hearing the music playing, I'm hearing these numbers going through my head. There's a 1 chord, there's a 4 chord, there's a 6 minor, and so on. And so it's just kind of cool how it kind of all comes together.
It is, yeah. Well, that's great. I remember myself with working with students with even the idea of in terms of tuning forks and looking at the measurement of that and how it is all related, powers of 2, and very fascinating with that. You did it. You gave us a chance at the end there. We saw, of course, one of your raps and so on. Do you have some other favorite math songs that for those of in the classroom might want to try?
Well, what I do like to do, this is what I would like to say. I'm a big person of advocating for creativity in the classroom. And so what I do like to give kids the opportunity to demonstrate their creativity. And so giving kids the opportunity to make up songs. Rap songs are an easy way to do it because you don't have to come up with the music. You just come up with the words, and you get to play something in the background. So a big thing is to just have some song that they really like. I expanded this session into a 1-hour TI workshop back in the spring of this year, and in that I used an Eminem 8 Mile just as a little intro to a little rap. And then in that, I just basically, instead of lose yourself, I said, use your stuff. And so I just use little phrase. I like to take little songs and make math parody connections of them. So just fun things like that. And then let that be like a springboard to let kids kind of demonstrate their own creativity in the class. So that's just a fun way of connecting music into the classroom.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, I remember there was a long time ago, but I think it was on a NCTM article, but they had a fellow who did something like that. And he had the song in this article was "We Will Graph You," to the tune of "We Will Rock You."
Yeah.
And what a great way. We had the students
Yeah.
were going the boom, boom, boom,
Mhm.
boom, all through and it was a great way for them to remember
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And I think you're right in terms of rap. I mean, you think of rap music in terms of the strong connections, and for students today that might be into rap music to realize that there's a lot of the math behind that. I think that's wonderful.
Well,
Um,
even to give them the opportunity to just demonstrate some creativity in my math class. That it's funny how most of our teaching, it's about building relationships with our kids. And so if I can build a relationship, and it's just because you wrote a cool song to a rap song and you just taught just a simple math concept, something like that, it just gives a kid another way for me to make a connection with a kid. And so that's just another thing that I like about the power of music, is it opens up the door for me to kind of build a relationship with a kid a little bit better.
oh, it is. You think of we often are searching, right? And is in a mathematics classroom more so than in science, but to be able to connect to the real world, and we may do same things with various different things in the world, sports and so on, but in engineering, etc. But then music is one area that for a lot of students can really resonate. So
Mhm.
I think that is great for the work that you've done. Um, if you'd had more, so you talked about you've done a 1 hour
Mhm.
workshop on this, and because one of the things I was wondering about, if you'd had more than 7 minutes, well, that's what we give you. What else would you like to? If you haven't got an hour, we've only
Mhm.
we've only got a bit of time, but what else would you like to sort of add into that if you can?
Well, even as I was listening to that, each one of those main things, the Pythagorean ratios, there is a lot that you can do when you even just talk about how the Pythagorean ratios even came to be. Pythagoras basically believed that you could generate every note in the scale by taking the perfect fifth ratio, which is a 2 to 3 or a 3 to 2, depending on whether you make a one string longer or shorter than the other. But that 2 to 3 ratio, it's what we call the perfect fifth. And so Pythagoras built the fractions, which are really approximations. I don't know whether or not he and his followers knew that they were approximations, because they thought everything was rational anyway. We've come to find out that his ratios were approximations of the exponential relationship between the scales, but still his his fractional relationships are so close to the exponential ones. Just that portion of the talk, when if you wanted to expand on that, that's really really rich, because if you take the 2/3, all of those Pythagorean, there was one slide in there where I put those 13 Pythagorean ratios up there. But if you those 13 ratios can be generated just by using powers of 3/2. So 3/2 then gives you 9/4 and etc. But no, using the relationship between octaves are either multiples of 2 or multiples of 2 to the negative n, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, and so on. If you take those, Pythagoras called them stacked fifths. If you stack those fifths and then multiply them by either a positive power of 2 or a negative power of 2 to get the ratio, those fractional ratios to fall between 1 and 2, that's how you get those Pythagorean ratios. And then to compare those to the exponential decay, and then make those measurements. Like, say, you can even take a guitar and measure the distances of the frets. They align really closely to those Pythagorean estimates, and it's just really cool, that particular thing. In fact, I'll give my email address out here to anybody who's watching, and if you send me an email, I can send you I do an investigation. Others have done it too. I've seen it in NCTM, but but you can look at the frets of a guitar and compare it to exponential decay, compare it in contrast to the Pythagorean ratios. But that's a cool thing. So each one of those components, looking at Fibonacci a little bit more, looking at Euclid a little bit more. So there's a lot of potential for expansion and other connections when you use the kind of the music as the initial hook to get into those concepts and then expand on them a little bit further. So I know we only have 7 minutes in the presentation, but there's a lot of depth and richness that can be explored in those concepts beyond that.
Yeah. Well, I was certainly fascinated with the guitar. I mean, I myself that was one thing when you presented that. I thought, wow, okay, because you look at it, you think, oh, isn't it just someone decided, oh, that sounded nice, or there,
Yeah.
is there a reason? And then to realize that there was a mathematical connection to it is fascinating. Just a question. So, and if you're not sure, that's perfectly fine. But have you looked at any other instruments? I'm thinking of things like saxophone or flute as well. Is there anything that connects? Oh, you smile. Yeah.
That's a great question. The three of instruments that I'm familiar with are the ones that I've played throughout my life. I grew up playing piano in the house. We had a piano. I never really took lessons, but I just played throughout all my life. And I think that's where kind of developed my ear as a kid. So I played piano. I take it back. I played trumpet. I forgot in elementary school. I played trumpet for 2 years, and then I played baritone in middle school, which is like a miniature tuba. So I've had some musical background besides my three main ones, but I haven't looked at flutes and did measurements. But I'm sure that would be a cool thing to investigate, because where is the placement of the holes within the flute? In the clarinet, the same thing. I guarantee you, I don't know it because I haven't researched it, but there has to be a lot of math into the placement of all of the holes. And I'll bet you some of our listeners are probably saying, "Oh, I could answer that question a lot better than Dave is." But
yeah, okay.
There's a lot of math in the design of all of the instruments too, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, you would think so. Yeah, I was to say, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I think you're right.
No,
If
that's
others
cool.
people
No, that's a great
that
question.
are in, yeah. Well, it made me think, just like I say, with the tuning forks, I mean, you've got A starting at 440, right? So that, and all the other notes, though, are powers of 2 based on that. And so you would think that, yeah, there must be some way in the way they design the instrument. But again, I'm speculating as well. So
that's cool. But watch this.
Certainly the comments.
You said A is 440, which is here, and this is a challenge that I'm going to give to the listeners. We know that A is 440. Find the frequency. Here's my challenge to the listeners. Find the frequency of an E note, right? I'll leave it up to you to find it. We know that A is 440. Kevin just told you. But if you find the ratio, the frequency of an E note, and then divide that frequency by 440, you'll get 1.5. Go ahead. There's your challenge. There's your homework assignment for the listeners out there, because the E is the fifth of the A. And so that perfect fifth ratio is a 3-to-2 ratio. So you divide the frequency of an A by the frequency of the frequency of the E by the frequency of the A, you'll get 1.5, which is a 3-to-2 ratio, which is kind of cool. So there
that is, yes, that is cool.
And that would be true on a flute. It would be true on a clarinet. It doesn't matter, because the frequencies of an A is still the frequency of an A.
Well, I know, sort of my ignorance a bit, and you'll probably laugh at this part. I used to always think with middle C. Well, middle C's the middle, must be 220. No, it doesn't work that way. No, anyways, but yeah, no, that's cool. That's fascinating for that. Are there? I mean, just look and see. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes. In terms of other resources or other things, other opportunities that you have, is there anything that you've used or you can share with educators or direct them?
Yeah. I would say do a lot of studying with Euclid, because I know I talked a lot tonight about Pythagoras, but Euclid with his Euclidean algorithm, if you're unfamiliar with the Euclidean algorithm, it's just for every integer a and b, there exists another integer q and another integer r, such that a equals bq plus r, right? That's the Euclidean algorithm. But that Euclidean algorithm is used in so many different ways. And that article that I referenced from Godfrey Toussaint and from one of your boys up there in Canada, Kevin, um, uh, uh, in Montreal. I know that might be a cuss word to you, but hey, or are you a Montreal fan? You're a Toronto fan, right?
No, I'm a Montreal fan. Yes.
There you go. It's Fred that's the Toronto fan,
Yeah.
right? but he did his research on the Euclidean algorithm and how it's used not only in rhythm, it's used in so many other places, but it's just a cool, but even introducing it in terms of that rhythm of how you space out evenly a number of things within a number of spaces, that just opens up the door to so many other kinds of explorations in computer science and in physics, just a lot of connections. So explore Euclidean rhythms and explore the Fibonacci sequence, because as I mentioned in the talk, when I sit down at the keyboard, I see the 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 thing every time I sit down at a keyboard. And so again, that opens up the door to send kids outside to find things out there that are one of the Fibonacci numbers, and just open up the door to conversations and to thinking about Fibonacci things that occur in nature besides just in the keyboard. So I'd say just those three main historical figures kind of open up the door for lots of other exploration.
Okay. Well, that's great. Yeah, and you mentioned things like coding. I know that some of our listeners may have done some work with the TI Innovator Hub and work where you can create the notes and you can code that. And it's quite fascinating. I've even seen I think it was a few of our educators have done this, where they've almost created a bit of a keyboard on the calculator, and by playing certain keys, and you recognize that it hits certain notes on the Innovator
Cool.
Hub. And very fascinating, and kind of neat how you then start tying in, as you say, the mathematics and what you look at. I don't know if there's any music people out there that probably think, oh, you mean every time I sit down now I'm going to start thinking math? Oh no. And that's why I appreciate what you've done is by really showing the beauty of math with something that is fun, music, and something very relatable for students as well. And I think that's so important with that. Um, in terms of just sort of one other thought I had, one other question to you. You mentioned about your background growing up and so on. Have you found in terms of any of the students you've worked with, as your work with math and music sort of sort of propelled them in any certain terms of a career in that area?
I can't say that I've had that fortune, but I just will say this: music is such a important. I mean, it's such a common uniting thing, and so you know whether you teach a lesson that's specifically about some specific mathematics of particular music pieces, or if you just use the natural human connection of music itself. A great example that in the 1 hour presentation that I gave back in the spring, I gave an example from a rock band that they wrote a song where the syllables of their lyrics were according to the Fibonacci sequence, and it's the band Tool, and so they did just rhythmically. I called it a Fibo-Q, a height instead of a haiku. But given that as a challenge to the kids, can they come up with a 2-syllable, 3-syllable, 5-syllable, 8-syllable kind of a little poem or whatever? So giving even things like that, where it just allows kids to tap into the natural love and connection of music that they have, that it can be surprising sometimes, the different kids that can tap into something in our math class that we didn't expect, because you've got this kid sitting in the corner that just loves music and hasn't always necessarily thrived in our math class. But when we started talking about music, just something woke up inside that kid.
Right.
That's one of the
Well,
powerful things about music, is that it can just, connect with different kids in the class that we don't normally connect with.
right. Well, thank you so much, David, for tonight and for joining us. I love that. I mean, I even brought my guitar, but we didn't get a chance to do anything. But thank you very much for joining us.
Well,
We'll
thanks for
look
having
forward
me.
to for next week if you want to join us. We're going to actually talk a bit more about another 7 for 7. We're going to have Amin Lalani joining us from the University of Texas in Dallas, and we'll be talking about risk taking. So
Hey,
look forward
Kevin,
to seeing you then.
can I leave my email address?
Sure.
D as in David, SWORD, sword, 1 at hotmail.com. DSword1 at hotmail.com. If anybody wants to connect with me, and I'll share some of my resources with you, and just want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to share with you tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.